These games literally destroyed franchises. For me, anyway. Hello! Welcome to another episode of Donald Mackerel Gaming with me, Donald Mackerel. Bit of a special one too, though, because we've actually got a bit of a collaboration going on with Command and Console. Jason, obviously, from Command and Console. The list today is 5 games that destroyed a franchise for me, personally. So it's a very subjective thing. Obviously, these aren't fact. It's just something that I feel destroyed a franchise. And I thought, well, instead of doing 5 games, why don't we make it 10 games? Which is why Jason's been in touch. We're going to do a list together. We might do a follow-up to this with games that saved a franchise, but today it's destroying franchises. So let's see what our picks are.
Thank you very much, Donald, for letting me be a part of your collaboration, your video of games that killed their franchises. Obviously, this is going to be a subjective look, so these games might not particularly killed the franchise objectively, but subjectively, from my point of view, they did at the time. So my first pick, number 5, is going to be Worms 3D. I remember growing up with the original Worms, but it was on the PlayStation, and then the sequel came out, Worms Armageddon. 2D, side view, turn-based strategy games where you've got to wipe out the enemy team's worms before they can do the same to you. It was really fun, had loads of in-jokes, loads of movie references and pop culture references, tons of weapons to use in the game. It was a really fun kind of like, just let's wipe out the enemy team before they can do the same to you. And then they went 3D with it. And I didn't think it worked at all at the time. I still don't think it works that well now as an adult, I feel like they've taken that side view, which made the game really easy to kind of gauge where things were and, have that kind of almost like a Lemmings vibe. And I think they took that away when they went 3D. They made it more, not complex per se, but more kind of clunky, a bit awkward to play. And I just didn't feel like it worked within the mechanics of Worms. I felt like it was just a bit too clunky. And I've not played a Worms game since this one. 3D is where they were going, and it's not what I wanted from that series. That's Worms 3D.
So the first pick for me, one of my favourite games of all time, which sounds completely bananas that it destroyed a franchise, but it did. LMA Manager 2007. It was literally the last ever LMA Manager game. Well, proper game, and this is where the issue lies. So with LMA Manager 2007, it is quite simply the best pick and play football manager game that ever existed. It was rivaling Football Manager at the time. It was the console's version of Football Manager, so it was selling loads. What did Codemasters do? Go, right then, well, we want to beat Football Manager. They didn't stand a chance, obviously, because there's more PC owners, more people on the PC were used to it. It still made money, just not enough for Codemasters, so they decided to knock all console versions on the head. That's how petty it was. They tried to do a mobile phone version for Football Manager, LMA Manager 2008. Flopped massively. Of course it did, because mobile phones back then couldn't really handle football management games, and it was awful. It was awful too. Since then, people have been calling out for a new Football Manager, and for some unknown reason, Codemasters just refused to do it. Oh, and also, the version on the PC has got like some sort of code encryption, so it's really, really hard to get working. So, and that was even when it came out. It was blooming impossible to get working. So 360 is the best version, which is the one I love. PS2 is all right. It's not as good as the 360. That one, death. And then, they just turned it into a mobile phone game. So sadly, Football Manager 2007 destroyed the franchise.
Hi there, it's me again. So my number 4 pick is going to be Final Fantasy 12. I'm speaking of obviously the original release from 2004. I'm guessing it came out. I can't remember. But Final Fantasy 12. So I was big into, Final Fantasy at the time. Final Fantasy 10 being a massive hit on PS2. Loved that one. And then I was really looking forward to Final Fantasy 12 coming out, because Final Fantasy 11 was an online multiplayer, like kind of like MMO. So I wasn't interested in that one at all. Didn't have a PC to play it anyway. But I was really hyped for this. A true single player RPG from Final Fantasy. Super excited for it. Got it, and they changed the goddamn classic turn-based battle system to something really, really just laborious and boring to me. Sure, you can run around during combat, but I just found it unengaging and a bit dull. And, you know, going back to the earliest of Final Fantasy 7, 8 and 9 and 10, having that classic, like, wait your turn kind of turn-based combat, they took it away and it just wasn't as good. I found it really slow at the beginning as well, really slow to get going, and it put me off Final Fantasy for the longest time. And you know, Final Fantasy 13, never played that. 13-2, never played that. The third 13 sequel, never played that. Played a little bit of 15 when it came out. It was okay, nowhere near as good as the classic Final Fantasies, and obviously that went full action game at that point, so definitely wasn't into that at all. And yeah, the only Final Fantasy game that I've really got on board with since this one is Final Fantasy Stranger of Paradise, which I've spoken to on my channel before, being a Dark Souls-esque game set in the Final Fantasy universe. It's kind of a pseudo remake of Final Fantasy 1 as well. So that game was a lot of fun because it was a spin-off and it took things in a completely different direction. It wasn't a mainline game. But for a mainline game for like Final Fantasy 12, taking away what I would consider the true essence of Final Fantasy games, that addictive turn-based combat, and replace it with something a bit weird, it wasn't for me. So yeah, that's my number 4. That's Final Fantasy 12.
Right, so with me and Jace, you're going to see a few controversial ones. It's not designed just to get people clicking and people commenting. It's literally, these are our feelings. This is how we feel about some of the games that maybe you love. This one, I definitely know it's got a lot of love out there, but for me, I detest it and it made me hate the franchise. Fallout 4. I originally played it on the PS4. This is the Xbox One version. I only picked it up because it was like £1. I've tried playing it again recently. Look at that, Fallout 3 included for free. Tried playing it again recently. Still can't stand it. Still don't like the way it plays. It's not a Fallout game. If you want to make that game, just make that game. Take the blooming Fallout tag off it. It is not a Fallout game. It is awful. The choice system. I remember I bought like an advanced copy where you got a soundtrack with it and some sort of blooming stickers and a poster and all sorts of stuff. Wish I'd never done it now. Spent a lot of money getting that and it was absolute, yeah, not even going to say the word, but awful. I'd say the dialogue system, terrible. The action, terrible. They messed up VATS, even though VATS was basically made for Fallout 3. Yeah, really, really bad, especially coming off the back of New Vegas. So off the back of that, I've really not played any more Fallout, and yeah, I definitely blame Fallout 4 for it.
Oh yeah, I'm back again to ruin your lives apparently with these lists, because I can see people seething. They're seething at these lists. It only gets worse for you guys. It only gets worse because my picks are going to everybody off. Anyway, my number 3 is going to be Ninja Gaiden 3. Because coincidentally, I remember being super hyped for this game when it came out. I remember like loving the first game for original Xbox. Ninja Gaiden 2 might have been even better in my opinion. Absolutely adore Ninja Gaiden 2. Ninja Gaiden 3 comes out, super excited. I buy it on day one. You know, I paid like £45 for it. Way too much for a game in my opinion. I beat it in a day and I took it back and got a refund because I'm like, this game was so poor, so bad. It took everything away that you would expect from a Ninja Gaiden game. There was no challenge. There was no kind of visceral combat. The story was... It was awful. Absolutely awful. And yeah, I do plan to replay it at some point. But I remember at the time, I couldn't have been more crippled with disappointment than I was. And... you know, I've not played a Ninja Gaiden game since. I know they re-released this one and made it a bit more kind of fuller in terms of its content. But this game, it killed the franchise in somewhat of an objective fashion because we hadn't had one since. But on a subjective, personal fashion, this wasn't it. It wasn't it at all. And I was just like, this series is dead from now on. And even the zombie spin-off that came out, Yaiba, is kind of a better game, but it's still pretty bad as well. But Ninja Gaiden 3 was the death knell for this series. That's Ninja Gaiden 3.
Next choice, something that probably won't, not many people out there are going to relate to. It's NBA 2K13. Now, not the Wii U version, it's pretty much any version other than this. I might even still be on this, but it's the first one that had virtual currency in. So it's the first one that pushed like the monetization of games, and it made a real grind to in your My Player mode to create your player and take him through his career. Made it a real grind. It was Blooming awful, absolutely awful. People rate this as one of the best 2K games going, but again, it's mainly the younger people that didn't know that games, you didn't used to have to spend money after buying the blooming game. You could just play the game and unlock things and be better. You could do it in this, but as I say, it take blooming ages. I would have said NBA 2K16, but mechanically it's a better game. The only reason why I don't like 16 is Spike Lee did a career mode on it where you could make yourself a white, 7-foot tall Ukrainian person. For some reason, he's born in New York and he's got a black family. It's the most racist story I've ever seen. I know, Spike Lee, a racist, who'd have thought it? But yeah, this one pushed monetization. So for me, that destroyed the franchise, and I've not really played any of them since. Coming off the back as well, before this, it was Jordan was the cover, then Jordan was the cover again, and before that, it was Kobe Bryant. Look at that. Look at that. We've got Blake Bloody Griffin, Kevin Durant, and Derrick Rose. None of them measure up to Jordan and Kobe. Awful, awful. Killed the franchise for me.
Back again with number 2 of my picks. This is going to off a bunch of people as well because it's a beloved franchise, but for me it didn't cut the mustard back in the day. I have recently replayed it when it was remastered for PS4, so I've got more of an appreciation for it now, but I'm speaking of at the time, and it's all about at the time. It's for, you know, going back when these games came out and how I felt about them, and this game killed the franchise dead for me. That is Burnout Paradise.
What?
I know, I can hear the screams and the clicking of the keyboards of how wrong I am. This is a terrible take, Jason, what you're doing. I know, but at the time, I didn't want an open world racing game. With literally, it has pretty much no direction to it whatsoever. You've got to drive around and find races and stop at traffic lights to engage in other races. And I felt like it was a bit boring and kind of had no direction in what you had to do in the game. Maybe it was my young naive brain at the time, but this just wasn't it. You know, we had massive hits with the Burnout franchise. We had Burnout 3, which might be the greatest arcade racing game of all time in my opinion. Burnout Revenge, which I still think is a great racing game, maybe not as good as Burnout 3, but it kept that same kind of lineage going. It was great. It's still a great arcade racing game. When this came out and it went all open world, and I was just like, this is not what I wanted from this franchise. I wanted, you might think I'm boring, I wanted more of the same with prettier graphics, cooler modes, and of course, awesome crash physics and stuff like that. This has that, of course, it has the cool crash physics, but the open world nature of it, where you don't know if you're progressing in the game that much, just really put me off this game. I think I played it, you know, for maybe, back in the day, I must have put about maybe like 8 or 10 hours in, and I was done. I was just like, this game is not for me. I don't like it. You know, it's one of those games where you really want to play more of it because you're like, I must like this game. I've got to make myself like this game. But I just couldn't do it. I appreciate it more now as an adult, but at the time, this was the death knell of the Burnout series for me. That's Burnout Paradise.
Next controversial one, another RPG. I'm going to try and keep this short, even though it's so hard for me. I get really worked up with this one. So as you can see, this is the Mass Effect trilogy. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking Mass Effect Andromeda. No, Mass Effect 3. Mass Effect 3 for me. The original Mass Effect, again, quite controversial, for me, was the best game. It was an RPG with action elements. Mass Effect 2 started tipping the scales more towards action, and ladies with the wobbly bits out, like fighting in high heels. What's going on there? Absolutely blooming mental. It's meant to be a war going on, and putting high heels on and getting the waps out just so they can fight aliens. And then it got to number 3, the game that was so poor. I'd loved it, even with 2 not being my cup of tea. I'd loved the story all the way to the end of 2. Then they forced a 3rd game out. The story was absolute rubbish. The gameplay was awful. It was just action again. The RPG element wasn't even there, really. Yeah, you could make some choices, whoop-de-doo. Then you get to the end of the game, and no matter what you do, it's a bad decision. I know they fixed it with DLC. I know they did, but it was too little too late for me. That destroyed the franchise. I was actually pleasantly surprised when I played Andromeda, but I played Andromeda way too late. I picked it up like when that was about £1 or £2, something like that. So yeah, Mass Effect 3, franchise killer for me.
I'm back again to ruin everyone's bloody lives with this last pick. My number one is going to absolutely ruin all of you. I'm sorry, guys, but this is just obviously it's a subjective list. This is my opinion. We could have gone objective with it, but we thought subjective would be more interesting. My number one is going to be Resident Evil 4. I know. I can hear you. I can hear you. I can hear the screams of doom all the way in the back at the internet. I can hear it. But yeah, let me just explain this though, because I think if I explain it, you guys will understand where I'm coming from. So I was a massive Resident Evil fan back when this came out. I'm still a huge Resident Evil fan as an adult now. It's my favourite video game series of all time. I have every game nearly for every system, but not quite. You know what I mean? I collect Resident Evil games. I love the franchise. I love the series. It's awesome. So this came out and I was crippling disappointed with it. Because what I wanted for Resident Evil was the traditional, you know, static angles, survival horror, just the stuff that Resident Evil 1, 2 and 3 gave us, and Code Veronica, just classic Resident Evil. Obviously this game reinvents the series to great success, may I add. Of course, you know, objectively it was successful. It was, you know, one of the biggest games ever, right? But for me, little old me in 2005, I was like, what the F is this shit? I wanted survival horror, awesome survival horror, you know, fixed camera angles, the classic Resident Evil. And this is where the series slightly took a turn towards that over-the-shoulder action game. And I wasn't on board back in the day. I was not bored. I was not on board at all. It completely killed the franchise for me. And obviously, I did go on to play the franchise, you know, moving on from 4. I played 5, I played 6. But the whole what made the series special, in my eyes, which is where, you know, Resident Evil 1, 2, 3 and Code Veronica come in, it was no longer there for me. The actual essence, the DNA of Resident Evil was no longer in the series from this game onward. And it took years and years until Resident Evil 7 came out for it to really kind of bring back that survival horror DNA. But yeah, in my opinion, as much as I like this game nowadays, at the time, this absolutely killed the franchise for me. People were putting this on Game of the Year lists and talking about how like it's the best game in the series, it's so good. And I'm like, are you really serious? Like Resident Evil for me was survival horror, fixed camera angles, micromanaging your gear. I know you have a little bit of that in this, but we went down too far of the action route for me at the time. And yeah, it's taken me years to really get on board with it as an adult. And obviously I appreciate it now, and the remake is incredible. I love the remake of it as well. But yeah, in 2005, this definitely killed the franchise for me. That's Resident Evil 4.
And my final game, this one was so bad that I literally threw it away when I moved house. It's probably worth about 20 or 30 quid now, something like that. An old PC game, big box, but it was that bad that I just couldn't stand looking at it. It made me feel angry because of what happened with me. So it was Ultima Ascension, so Ultima 9, the 9th game in the franchise. As I say, I don't have the game anymore, so I've made my own cover of it there. that's my cover of it. Yeah, the Ultima. Yeah, so the reason why I don't like it was because I loved the Ultima franchise. I'll be honest, I only started playing Ultima 4, but then I picked them up on every single console that I could from then on, and they were always a gem. They were always absolutely fantastic. I don't think I played number 8. I think I missed number 8. But I had a reasonable PC when number 9 came out, and I remember seeing that Ultima 9 was getting released. Happy, joy. Went down to my computer shop, I think it was in Shrewsbury, bought it off the shelf, paid about like 40 quid for it back then, so it was quite a bit of cash. And I say, it came in a big box with a map and everything. I was so overjoyed. Put it in my PC. My PC struggled to handle it, so it was quite power consuming, and you know, you really needed a good PC to be able to play it. I didn't realise that, so yeah, my fault. Then eventually I get a PC that can handle it, pop it in, and it is the worst game I have ever blummin' played. Absolutely terrible. Awful, awful game. Completely changed the system. Made it 3D. Why was the fascination with making everything 3D? Just ruined it. Absolutely ruined it. Game was awful. I gave up on it. So did a lot of other people, including the people that made the Ultima series. Oh yeah, Electronic Arts were involved. What a blooming surprise. So yeah, they stopped making the Ultima series. There was no more after Ultima 9. So Ultima 9, or whatever that says, is the worst blooming game and a complete franchise killer for me, and literally. Well, that's the end of the list. Quite controversial in some states, but I'm sure people will agree on the other one. Thank you for Jason from Command and Console as well for chipping in with his 5 franchise killers. I say we are going to try and do another video about games that saved franchises, so please do go over, check his channel out. It is absolutely fantastic. Lots and lots of lists, lots and lots of good stuff. Very knowledgeable guy as well. A lot more of a gamer than I am, so this is more of a rants and giggles. His is more of a proper gaming channel. So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. Good to see you. Do go over and check his channel, but please keep on checking mine out. It's been Donald Mackerel for Donald Mackerel Gaming. Cheers, everybody.